Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. This video, or this essay rather, is the second attempt at talking about this subject, which is the main sources of immigration peoples to the West. I did this one 3 days ago, I guess. It was fine when I loaded it, then quite mysteriously the entire soundtrack disappeared, and I can only speculate on how that happened. But this is the second attempt at it. So if this one goes off the rails, then we'll know there are sinister forces afoot. But I guess there's a couple of things that I'm going to talk about here. One is the sources of immigration, and then to the West, from what parts of the world are they finding all these immigrants, and then how well, if at all, these immigrants assimilate or are of any benefit to the West. So now the two main sources of the two big chunks, if you like, of population that are one's, I think, leveled off somewhat, and the other one is growing fast. You've got the Indian subcontinent that has over 2 billion people on it. And 1.5 to 1.7 billion of these people are dirt poor peasants, and they want to get the fuck out and go to these rich Western countries that they see on television. And by the way, a lot of those governments in those areas, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Indian government, they're more than happy to get rid of their surplus population. And boy, do they have a surplus population. That continent that's got 2.1 billion or so people is probably only capable of supporting in anything even resembling a middle ranking lifestyle of only maybe 350 million people on a good day. So that gives you an idea of just how overpopulated it is. There's a lot of people there that are living on a very different cost of living, by the way, but they're living on a family of fours living on $1,000 a year, that sort of thing. So that'll give you an idea as just how poor some of those people are. But bear in mind, though, it's not $1,000 a year as you would imagine it in a first world country. That's $1,000 a year where you can buy a month's supply of rice for $20. So you need to adjust there to get some sort of understanding of how the different purchasing power regimes work all across the world. So just having a look at that, there's just that population is sort of starting to level off a bit. There was explosive growth in that subcontinent population. So you've got a huge population of people in the subcontinent between the ages of 18 and 35, for example. And they're people that all the governments in the region are rather keen to get rid of, whether they send them to any white countries. We just want to get rid of them. Any white country will do. And so you've got these unusual numbers of Indians, for example, but others there, again, Pakistan and so on, that are leaving India. Now, the population, again, we need to understand that the population of the subcontinent alone is double the entire world's population of white people. So just let that sink in. Just the Indian subcontinent is double the entire world's population of white people. So when they start moving en masse, they quickly and easily outnumber the white population anywhere on the planet if they moved in sufficient numbers. And we need to understand just to Britain alone. I mean, just to consider this. Just to Britain alone, the subcontinent is sending 160,000 people every fucking year just to Britain alone. Just that one country, 160,000. Now, if you multiply that out, that means there are something like 2 million to 2.5 million subcontinent people moving to the West every year. Every year, 2.5 million people are going to the West, moving to live. And then you add to that the students and the family reunions, chain migration, temporary work visa, all this sort of thing. Then you can see it's a mass movement of population. Now, the other population movement that's occurring, and this is, again, let's use Britain as an example. Over the last 10 years, approximately 100,000 Africa, this is sub-Saharan Africans, by the way, so black Africans, 100,000 sub-Saharan black Africans have moved to, again, just Britain alone, 100,000 a year for the last 10 years. So this gives you a scale of it. Now, Africa currently has a population. Yeah, there are more people living in Africa than there are white people in the entire planet. So that, again, it illustrates sort of the numerical imbalance here. Now, it's estimated, and these are projections, so they may go wrong, but I have every reason to believe they're on or about accurate, if not slightly understated, that the population of Africa over the next 30 to 40 years will double. And there are no job opportunities for them there. There are all the economies in that area are just basket cases, and constant tribal warfare, civil war, gross mismanagement of the agricultural sector. Let's just as an example in Zimbabwe or any of the countries around there, when the whites were in control, or at least in control of the agricultural sector, not only was that sector thriving, but it was exporting vast amounts of grain and various other produce around the world, and it was considered to be one of the premier bread baskets, if you like, in terms of grain in East Africa. Within less than 10 years of the blacks taking over, not only was Zimbabwe incapable of exporting grain, but they were having to import nearly all their food requirements. Such was the mismanagement and the tribalism and the incompetence and so on in the agricultural sector or government generally. So we've got a nation that is so a area of the planet that is so mismanaged, that is so riven with tribal warfare, corruption, and so on, that there's no place for these black Africa. The only reason there's a huge population explosion is because the West is pouring resources into medical care and things like that. So the mortality rates of newborns being 50% in general have now dropped to something like 10%. And because of the increased base level prosperity that they're having there, such as more wells are being dug and there's more food being gifted to them from the surplus food production of the West, there is, excuse me, currently a population explosion which will continue on. It's estimated for many decades to come. So you've got a massive surplus population of black Africans that are being encouraged by the United Nations and various NGO activist groups, which are crawling all over the place in Africa, to get these people, these young illiterate peasant men in particular, to move to the West. So, and they're being aided and abetted in that every step of the way. Journeys that they would never dream of attempting, they're being encouraged and subsidised and assisted and aided and abetted and so on, all the way through. And you look at these young men when they arrive in the West, looking very healthy, well-fed, wearing new brand new clean clothes with brand new joggers and things like that. And you don't live in an African village living by barter, then suddenly you can afford all these things and you can travel all this distance on your own with brand new Nikes when you get to the other end. No, that doesn't happen in the real world. But it just goes to show you the extent of the corruption in the people movement process and how much of a planned scam it is. But anyway, these people, if you just extrapolate the numbers here, then you're going to have, again, just coming to England alone, you're going to have between 150 and 200,000 of these people arriving every year, assuming the current trends continue. So on that basis, and then if you sort of multiply that out by 15 times, then there's going to be somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million Indians, as in subcontinent people, and the black sub-Saharan Africans. So 3.5 and 4.5 million people moving to the West every year, and that'll be happening in the next, within the next 20 to 25 years. So, on that basis, the entire white Western world will be obliterated by 2050, assuming those trends continue. And on current, certainly given the trends over the last 20 years, we can safely assume that is going to be the case. We can hope it's not, and wish it's not, and hope that our globalist controlled flunky stooge gobbler governments will get some backbone and say, hey, we actually represent the people here, the original citizens of the country. But I just can't see that happening. Look at the British government. They're owned lock, stock and barrel by the globalists, as indeed nearly all the they're all the Western governments. Only the small, insignificant economies that aren't relevant to the globalists, only they have some modicum of control over their government. They're still sovereign to some extent. So, but now look at we've got a problem, given that these two population pools, if you will, are the main sources of migration. Not that there aren't, the Albanian migration is a big thing at the moment into Britain, but the population of Albania is what, 3.5 million? They're not going to swamp anything with 3.5 million people, even though they're gangster mobs seem to be going everywhere and having gun battles in Sweden on the street and things like that. There's still only 3.5 million of them, so it's not like there's the combined population in a few years. The combined population of Africa and the Indian subcontinent is going to be heading towards 5 billion with a B, and they all want to get out of where they are and get to the West, which by their arrival in those numbers will obliterate the West, not only the Western population, but obliterate the West financially, organisationally. Everything that makes the West rich is being torn to pieces by the very people who are arriving to benefit from these so-called riches. Why was the West rich? Why was the West uniquely rich, and these other countries were all dirt poor? Why was that? It's because the West, and uniquely the West, had the most meritorious systems of promotion and of measurement of success and so on. Merit-based education, merit-based promotion, merit-based allocation of resources. The entire thing was because, and not that the West was perfect and didn't have patronage and nepotism, it did, but relative to all the other civilizations of the world, the West had a merit-based system, and that's being torn to pieces. The merit-based system, absolutely torn to pieces, and these freeloader migrants, these illegal aliens, and so on, they're just contributing handily to that destruction. Because every one of them that arrives has a right to affirmative action, gender and race quotas, and all the things that are non-meritorious. And when you go down the path of non-meritorious social organisation and resource allocation and so on, then you're just disemboweling the economy of its wealth. And this is exactly what's happening in the West currently. I don't think there's a single Western country that's actually running at a profit at the moment. They're all running at a loss. Find what's happening in the West currently. I don't think there's a single Western country that's actually running at a profit at the moment. They're all running at a loss, financed by magic money that the globalists are orchestrating, and so the wealth that the West has at the moment is quite illusory in many ways. Not the intrinsic wealth that it once had when it's primarily a merit-based system of promotion, resource allocation, education, and so on. So all that's disappearing, and with it will be the wealth. Having been again, as I've mentioned many times now, a business traveller over many decades. In fact, still do some travel, but over many decades, I was able to see right up close all the systems, all the other countries of the world where merit either played no part or played such a minor part in the overall economic and social structure of an area that it was close to irrelevant. And compared to the West, all these places, they had zero sort of merit-based systems Everything was by corruption and patronage, nepotism, tribalism. Some of it was there because there were so many tribes and groups. They sort of tried to keep the peace amongst them by allocating things out on a patronage system, and that kept a degree of social peace and harmony, or so they believed. And so there were sometimes reasons for it, but some were deep cultural issues as to tribal elders and systems of respect and things like that. But it meant that there was no merit, and that why are those economies poor? Why are they continue to be poor? Why were they always poor? Why were they poor 500-600 years ago? Why are they still dirt poor today? Why did these places hadn't even discovered the wheel until a couple of hundred years ago? Things like that. These are all issues of non-meritorious societies and why they're poor, and that's why they're poor. That's it. Merit is the difference. If you want to look, why is the difference? It's racism, it's Hitler, it's Nazis. No, bullshit. The difference is merit. That is the difference. Interestingly, as much as the Nazis are quite rightly, by the way, held up as having done some bad things. The Nazis and Hitler included was very much focused on merit. Why do you think German engineers were the first to design rocket engines, and all sorts of technology was developed uniquely in Germany during the Nazi era. So you can't say the merit didn't play a role. It did, very much so, in many ways, and technologically is one of them. But putting that aside. There are two main issues. Two main issues with the sources of migration, being the Indian subcontinent and Africa. On one side, on one side, the rate of economic integration by sub-Saharan Africans, the rate of economic integration into the first world, when they moved there to the West, be it Britain or the United States, whatever. The rate of economic integration is very small. Even assuming that people are arriving there without even the slightest hint of having once been slaves or anything like that, but arriving as free citizens and having been free citizens in wherever they came from, that sort of stuff. The rate of economic integration is still very low, even after the first and second generation born in the West. The rate of economic integration is still no more than 15, maybe 25% on a good day. And even with massive affirmative action programs and quotas, it doesn't really move it forward that much. You're still hovering around 25% economic integration on a good day. And if you were to withdraw all the affirmative action programs, then that would drop down quite sharply, because there's a lot of black kids, not in the United States, but Britain and elsewhere in the West, that are being affirmative action gifted high school diplomas, college courses, college degrees. In some places, you're not allowed at all to fail a black student. It doesn't matter whether they've totally failed or they didn't turn up for lectures at university or college. You're not allowed to fail them. So they're getting just degrees gifted left, right, and centre. So if you were to withdraw those props, those artificial props, which aren't really changing anything, they're encouraging a sort of laziness and apathy that don't really work in the real world. But again, it's part of this destruction of merit that's making the West poorer at a rate of knots, incidentally. So because the sub-Saharan African people, whether they arrive as free citizens from a free citizen nation, or whether they were brought as slaves and haven't been slaves for 160 years or something, that sort of thing. There's not one black person alive in the United States today that either was a slave or had parents who were slaves. So this idea that it's should and still be a pressing issue is, in terms of current economic integration, is still not is nonsense. But even if you look at the black population of the United States, they're still not economically integrating even now. Now there are reasons for that in the black sub-Saharan diaspora in Africa. There's still a very tribal village mentality of how you live. Even in the cities, there's a very small number of blacks, even blacks that are educated in the West. They did senior high school and university in the West. They still, when they come back to Africa, they still slip straight back into that tribal mentality. Well, not every single one of them, but most of them do. Tribal mentality and the concept is it's a communist ownership system where the village owns everything. You don't individually own anything. There's no private profit motive in the sense as we see today. The only things you have are temporary benefit like access to the hot chicks or something like that. So those type of things. But in terms of personal ownership, then the village owns everything or the tribe owns everything. So when they look at Western TV programs and so on, they hear about the wealth of the West from the NGO and United Nations agitators and activists. They think, wow, the West has got so much. Look at all those houses, all those cars, all those paved roads, all those, all the hot blonde chicks. I mean, wow, if I go there, then it's going to be like I'm just going to a bigger village with a lot more shit. So when I get there, they have to share everything with me. So I can have all those things. I can have that house and that car and the hot blonde chicks. And I can have all that because that's how everything in the world works. The village shares everything. And because they've got so much over there, they're going to share it with me. I'm entitled to that. And they're egged on and encouraged by because remember, we're talking illiterate peasants here. They're encouraged by the NGO agitators. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you go there and get that, and then they can't wait to get over there and have all this free shit because everything's going to be shared with them. So and even today, a lot of Americans, black Americans, think exactly the same way as they would have done, hundreds of years ago in the African tribal village. The white people in America, even the blacks who've lived there for 400 years, or as in their descendants over 400 years, they still see that white people got so much. Why won't they share it with us? Why won't they just give us their house? They've got so much. So the idea of earning things and working to acquire something and self-sacrifice, self-restraint, self-denial, nah, that's all white bullshit. So that's the one side. So the black Africans don't economically integrate. Even 2, 3, 4 generations on, the rate of integration is still very low. Now let's look at the subcontinent. Now, in terms of economic integration, it's partial. I mean, we need to just examine that. I'll come back to that in a moment. But the people in the subcontinent, their social integration, that is, intermarrying, mixing socially with white people as just other people, not people of a different race or anything like that. The social integration is, well, the intermarriage with non-Indians is, well, not even 1%. It's very low, almost non-existent. And I use an example of Fiji, where the subcontinent Indians came to Fiji like 170 years ago. And the rate of social integration, intermarriage, and so on with the local Fijians is still less than 5%, and that's over 170 years. So and also they're economically isolated. They're within the economy, but as a unique block, like almost a self-contained block within their own community. So in the case the case in a point in Australia or anywhere they go is the subcontinent people don't socially integrate, far from, whether it be the Islamic Pakistanis or the Hindu Indians, they don't socially integrate at all. Very very low rate of integration. Similarly, and you see this just around Sydney. You look at, I was on the train a while ago. I don't take the train that much, so I tend to sort of see things more starkly than maybe someone that travels every day on the train. But just having a look at their kids at school who are, they're all sitting next to each other at school and all mixed. But at the minute the class ends, they just go straight into their racial groups, and the Indians, no less. So you see a bunch of kids, obviously not related, but they see a bunch of kids on the train, and these are say senior high school, for example, and it's you get the Indian group there, the Chinese group there, the Filipino group over there, the white group down the back. So these people aren't mixing at all, and as soon as they get together, they talk in their own language, as in the language of their genetic origins. So even though they can perfectly speak English, they choose not to, and they don't speak English at home. So the Indians don't integrate socially. Now, economically, they work as a unit, as in they want to keep all the money, firstly within their family, then within their diaspora. So the Indians, a bit like the black Africans, have a view that things are all communally owned. You've got so much, why don't you share it with me? The Indians, even the ones you think are quite sophisticated, the Indians have a view that there is a set fixed amount of wealth in the world, and the only way you can get more of it is by taking what the other guy has. So they come to the West to take, not to share, not to give, but to take. And they very much got this view, and a very much a view of entitlement as well. This is my opinion, of course. So they come to the West, and they ensure that every financial transaction they do where they pay money out is to another Indian, again, a relative or someone within the diaspora. When they're taking money, then they're happy to take it from the white folks, from any other group for that matter. But the white group being the most populous one for the moment. And so they're happy to take the money there. Now, when Indians first started coming to the West, they weren't promising students at all. They weren't doing well at school. The Indians were always in the bottom class, always flunking the exams and so on. They didn't do well. It's only when affirmative action education came out, where minority groups were being supposed to be assisted. It's only then that the Indians started doing very well at school. Not that they aren't diligent crammers. In some cases they are, but all these bright, clever Indians everyone talks about, I just never meet them. And I've done business with them, worked alongside them, hired them, traveled, sat down to cut business deals with them, and I just don't see these intelligent Indians everyone talks about. And I've hired Indians that have got million PhDs and so on, and it's allegedly in computer science, and they can't cut a line of computer code to save their lives. So all these bright people, in a sort of a sophisticated world of abstract theory, they're quite nice to talk to and come across as being intelligent, but only in a fast sort of moving, bouncing ball of abstract theory. But when you try and sort of tie them down, no, we need to talk about this, make a decision on this, then they flounder, and they're always trying to sort of wriggle out of it and that sort of stuff. So I don't meet all these intelligent Indians. I mean, some must exist. They're 1.4 billion, for goodness sake. So there have to be some bright people among them, but certainly not. No, it's not an across the board thing. Far from it. And I think most of the Indians or non-whites that are being gifted, they're the top marks. Like in the one area of Australia, the top 100 students in an alleged senior high school college graduation type exams, only 8 of them were straight white males. I just don't believe that. That's bullshit. And the white males were outnumbered by every other group in that sample of 100. So clearly affirmative action and quotas are playing a big part. Similarly, when Indians first started coming and looking for work, once it became clear that a lot of their qualifications weren't recognised, or were acquired corruptly. The Brahmin class in particular, it's quite beneath them to have to earn a degree or earn anything. That they are entitled to accolades merely by their birthright. So once it became clear that their qualifications weren't to be relied upon, or were acquired corruptly through some bullshit university in India, then they found it much harder to get employment. And so it was only when affirmative action and quotas, particularly in the public service or the bigger organisations, when that was instituted, which was done politically in the back room, there was no natural market forces involved here. It's only then that the Indians were given, they're coming over to the West in large quantities, and they were gifted positions again in the public service. So, totally and very unqualified Indians are being spread all over the place through these quotas and these affirmative action programs, and they're quite insufferable because they're so fucking entitled. It drives you crazy. But anyway, that's so the Indians don't only do business with each other. They take as much as they can through affirmative action and quota programs, of course. But and if you look at the say again, the situation in Fiji and places where the Indians were arriving in larger numbers, or subcontinent people will say arriving in larger numbers, say 60, 70 years ago, or even in Fiji 170 years ago, the social integration is close to zip, and the economic integration is, it appears they're economically integrating, but they're not. They're only doing business with each other. They're only spending money, and white institutions or other institutions don't directly benefit them. They're only spending that money if they have to, say buying the litre of milk in the supermarket or something like that, or I don't know, the things that they, say a qualified electrician, they've got to use electrician to do something. But what they'll do, even in there, they'll try and get one of their own diaspora to become the qualified electrician. Then they only use that person for that work. So again, they're very mindful of keeping that money in their diaspora. So they're in my view, the subcontinent people are in fact a drain on the economic resources of the West, and they engage in non-meritorious economic conduct on a grand scale, which further devalues and degrades the Western economy they operate in. Similarly, the Indian national newspapers and various media outlets and so on, they savour and salivate over the thought that their sheer numbers, the massive population, that if they continue the rates of migration to the West that they're currently on, that they'll be the majority group in the West, within the next 50 years, and they'll be calling the shots all over the place. And they're also recreating the caste system, like in Australia. The caste system is being recreated in the Indian caste system with the Brahmins at the top and so on, is being recreated in Australia, where schools with majority Indian students are already got the Brahmins at the top dictating, what the others will do and so on. I mean, do we really want that? You've been fantastic today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.